All right, gang, welcome back to the second chapter of Pitch Slap with Dan and Stefan. Woo!
I'm Dan, he's Stefan.
That's it. I'm Stefan, he's Dan. There's only two of us. Yeah. That's wild. But anyway,
Yeah.
Dan, what are you going to be sharing with me and the rest of the internet today?
All right. This is kind of a cop out considering what Stefan delivered in our last episode. So Stefan has heard this idea. He has read the short story, so he's familiar with it. But some people may not be. So let's just dive into it. This story that I'm going to pitch is a ghost story. I was inspired to write it after watching The Haunting of Bly Manor. Specifically one episode that I watched. I think it's the penultimate episode of the season. And I really liked the cyclical style of that ghost story. It's a story that sort of repeats itself. So that was my inspiration. I took it and I wrote a pretty short story. So I figured for this episode of Pitch Slapped, instead of like going beat by beat, I might just read the story since it's short enough, I think. I hope it doesn't bore anybody. And then I'll talk about if I were to adapt it to another medium, who might play this character and who might direct it, because I don't foresee me directing it. Does that sound good to you, Steph?
Oh man, I'm sold, and you should totally direct it, man. You got the hat. You're ready. You got tons of experience, man. Don't even play. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Keep on boosting my ego. I could use it. Yeah. So I'll just read it. So the title I have for it now is No Ordinary Ghost. There is a man I know who sits by his window. He has a pleasant, wizened face you can see sometimes from the street. With silver eyes so big and bright, they feel like they've drunk all the light in the world. The place he lives is home to many with his same affliction, the old and unremembering. On the bad days, he cannot tell you the day of the week or where he lives or even his own name. Those days, he is not himself, but more like a bear with its leg clamped tight in a trap. Those days are sad and scary and ever increasing. But on the good days, he can play cards, and he often does with the other residents. He can go down to the lake and feed the birds, and talks with his visitors and laughs. He can laugh at himself for all the silly things he does, like how he wears mismatched socks, or puts his shirts on backwards sometimes, or that one time he forgot to put pants on entirely and gave the nurses a good shout. Those are the good days. And on the best days, when we are lucky, he loves to tell one of his stories. I knew a man who was haunted by a ghost. His favorite story begins. Everywhere he went, it followed, ever since he was a kid. He didn't always know it was a ghost. He only knew what he saw, that there was something always lurking in the corner of his eye, fading from view when he turned to face it. But one night, he woke, and there the ghost was, standing at his window, looking in. It was but a shadow, tall and sinewy, and its eyes glinted like two stars in the dark. He was afraid, of course, but there was more to it than that. What he felt looking at that ghost was a great sense of despair, like he had forgotten every happy memory he ever had. And it was knowing this, knowing he had forgotten everything, that really scared the boy and filled him with a terrible dread. The next time the boy felt the ghost drawing near, when he felt that same despair creeping in, he ran and he hid in a closet, waiting for the ghost to pass. hoping the ghost would not find him. And for a time this worked, until one day the boy once again felt those great shiny eyes upon him. So the boy would run and find another place to hide and hope the ghost would not be able to find him. The trouble was, his home was quite small, and there were only so many places for one to hide, and the ghost, though slow to keep up, would eventually find him. So, when the boy was full-grown and very much his own man, he ran away, far from his countryside home, into a great bustling city on the other side of the world. There he found work as a painter, and kept a small room, and lived a simple life. And though he was lonely, he learned to forget his troubled past by loving that great bustling city, and for a long while this was enough. He felt happy and safe once more. That is, until one night, like one night before, he woke, and there the ghost was, standing at his window looking in. And he was a boy again, terrified and small, and he knew at this point that this was no ordinary ghost. This was not one of those wandering souls we all talk about, the dead and unremembered, confined to haunt their old dwellings or resting places. This ghost was something different entirely, something that would cross oceans, would wander every crooked street, and search every window to find him. The man did the only thing he could think to do, the only thing he knew how to do, really. He ran, and hid in another city, in another country of the world. And for a time this worked, until it did not. The trouble was, the world was quite small, and there were only so many places for one to hide. And the ghost, though slow to keep up, would eventually find him. So he would run, he would hide, each time with less affection for the places he went, each time with more fear and desperation than the last. He ran so far and fast, in fact, that one day he forgot exactly what he was running from, only that he was afraid of it. But he kept running, and he kept forgetting all the beautiful places he had seen, forgetting all the people he had met along the way, until one day he forgot how to run altogether. But the one thing he could not forget was fear itself. I knew a man who was haunted by a ghost, the old storyteller would say on the good days. Everywhere he went, it followed. There is a man I know who sits by his window. He has a pleasant, wizened face you can see sometimes from the street, with silver eyes so big and bright they feel like they've drunk all the light in the world, glinting like two stars in the dark, forever searching for a time that keeps running away from him. So that's the story. Oh, thank you, Steph. And I guess if I'm thinking about adaptations, this definitely does not seem like a piece that could span a feature film. So I could see this possibly being like a short film in the style of David Sandberg, the guy who directed Shazam. He produces a lot of horror short videos on his YouTube channel, and I think they're great, and I think he would be a wonderful director for something like this. I also, hold on, I have another note down here. I also think Mike Flanagan, who is the creator of the Hill House series and the Bly Manor series, I really love Mike Flanagan. I think every story he does it really well, and he understands that there's more to it than just scares. He understands that there's got to be some emotion behind it, and I feel like he could take this story and really do something different with it, So those are my top contenders for directors. As for the main character, I mean, I don't have an extensive cast here, Stefan, like you did with Ashes to Ashes, Dust to Dust. But with the main character, I was just like pulling out of like my pocket some people who I really like as actors, and I think could fill the role. So Stanley Tucci was like the first person who came to mind. I really like Stanley Tucci, and I think he's just an underrated actor. So I guess I'm part of the Tucci gang. I think he's great, and I think not only is he a good character actor, but I think he's just good at dramatic roles as well. So I would be really interested in seeing him do something like this. Now, with technology, they could age him up, age him down, so I know this character spans the gambit in ages, so they could find, movies are magic, they could find a way to do it. Mark Ruffalo was another person I could see doing this. I feel like Mark Ruffalo, I really like his dramatic work in Spotlight, and what's the movie's name? Like the Lonely Heart or the Broken Heart? It's the HBO movie. It was amazing, and he just did an amazing work in those dramatic roles. So I could see him doing that as well. Like, he's got a very emotive face. And also I'm gonna hop on the Pedro Pascal train here. Like, I could see him kind of rocking this as well, I'm a kind of a fan of Pedro Pascal, so I think he definitely, I think he could work his face a little more than what they're doing on The Mandalorian. putting him in the mask. He could like really, pull off those actor chops that he has. So that's my pitch. Thanks for listening.
Those are excellent choices as both directors. I think Mike Flanagan, David F. Sandberg, like both of those guys really understand horror, and that there's more to it. Like you said, well, just everything you said is absolutely well said. That's why those movies are so good. The ones that they've done are so good. And partially probably why horror films are having a renaissance in a way. As well as the actors you chose, all three of them are excellent. I know Pedro Pascal is having a bit of a moment right now, but like Stanley Tucci, that man's great. Like, he's a great actor. Pedro Pascal, Stanley Tucci. Who is the third gentleman? Ruffalo, yes. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the movie Thanks for Sharing, where he plays. Okay, you see, like that's a very good one. Or the movie Infinitely Polar Bear, where he plays someone who has bipolar disorder. Right, like the man can do it all. So Dan, I have a question, I guess, to ask you. I have a couple questions to ask you.
Yeah, you took notes. That was a little intimidating. I was like, oh my god.
No, well, first I have a lot of compliments. I absolutely love your use of simile, like your use of similes throughout your story, are fantastic. I especially love how you talked about the man's eyes, right? I also really like the metaphor that the world is quite small and the ghost would eventually find him. Right? Like, it's a small world. You bump into people, you bump into things. Maybe that's not even a metaphor. But my point is, whatever device that is, or even if it's not a device, that's just a beautiful line, right? Like, no matter how far you run, unfortunately, the world is small. It will find you. And that other line I thought was great was, every time it found him, more fear and desperation followed each time. Like, it's like, people think, oh, they got away, they can calm down. It's like, oh no, he found me. Like, I am twice as anxious and twice as scared and twice as likely to be, throwing up after getting somewhere. I think I'm safe again. And that image that you use of the man, like, essentially seems like playing hide and seek, right? Like, as a little kid, right? Like, we as people, our inner child, maybe people talk about, right? So in him, the man is this child, and this thing chasing him, is all the child's fears. And like, that's just a very cool image that you've created. So very, very impressive all the way around, man. Very impressive. Very
Thank
impressive.
you. Thank you, Steph. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
So now I gotta ask, and I could be off base, but like, is this ghost? Is this a metaphor for dementia in some ways?
I'm gonna play the author is dead argument. So explain like where you think you got that from, because I can see why you might think that, but yeah.
Okay, so
I'm gonna turn it back to you. I'm gonna put a mirror up to you. Why'd you think that the author is dead?
So I ask why dementia because you mentioned, and not I don't know anything from firsthand experience with dementia. That I know that's an ongoing horrific thing families are facing, but in your writing, you wrote about having good days and bad days, and I'm sure in medical books, but as well as when it's played on screen, they mention like oh, on his good days, he does remember. He does remember to talk with people. Who come visit him. He remembers to play like how to play cards with his buddies. He can laugh about some of the small things that he messes up on, like not wearing pants. And then you say the bad days, he's sad, he's angry, he can't remember, right? Like this idea of memories, right? That he has sometimes and doesn't have other times, and that's just what stuck out to me about dementia.
Yeah. Okay, I will step back into this. Yeah, I don't know if I was doing it consciously while writing, but I think once I got into it, that was definitely part of it, But I think you could read other things into it too, It could just be a symbol for fear, So, but definitely dementia was a part of it. I will say when so this has gone through quite a few drafts, Stefan, and really you've only seen this draft of it, but there was a prior version of this that was inspired by The Notebook, like very loosely inspired by The Notebook. So for those who don't know, The Notebook, or at least the movie, is a story about it's a love story told by a gentleman to a woman who cannot remember the story. So I don't know why I wanted to write a ghost story, that took inspirations from The Notebook. But my original idea is about two people, who were in love. One person, from the point when they were a kid, was seeing a ghost of somebody with shiny eyes. You know what I mean? And it turns out that person, they don't know it until the person, is older and they grew up. But, they were basically, I don't know, being haunted by the person that they would love. I don't know. It was a weird concept. That's why I simplified it. But yeah, I'm down. Someone want to pick me up? I don't know if I want to continue to elaborate on it. It wasn't working as a spin on The Notebook. So that's why I simplified it to one character. And I think it definitely, I hope it makes better sense than my original concept.
No. I mean, I think your concept is perfect, and now that you've given me some backstory, right, there are obviously other ways to look at it, right? So, if we're touching on The Notebook, right, like that's, I think, a pretty cool idea. You know what I mean? Like Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams are just two people similar to that, but it's like, loved ones follow you, they stick with you, right? And then like if this gentleman or character, right, doesn't remember, maybe the ghost is the one trying to tell him the story, but every time like it gets to a point where they could talk, he splits and runs away and she's left watching him, right? So I think you have a story that like opens itself to a lot of interpretation, which is cool. It's really cool because there's not the only one ultimately who could, put the final stamp of this is what this is you, and you don't ever have to do that. but it lets people play around with it. It means different things to different people. So that's a hard thing to do, to write something that lets your audience kind of think for themselves, not just about like, oh, I like this character, but like lets them play with the thoughts and like, this is what this is about. And then like some other chick or dude could be like, well, this is how I saw it. Like it's not an easy thing, man.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. It's very good. And I like the title, No Ordinary Ghost, but it makes me beg the question, what would make a ghost ordinary? Like every person I'm sure has their own ghost, and it might be ordinary, like, I don't know. It's just different for them, right? What other people may think doesn't matter, but for them, that's their ghost.
Yeah.
So that's real cool. So I guess I gotta know, man, you mentioned Blythe Manor, right? And that kind of ghost story. How did you decide to make the narrator, like, how did you give him such emotion when writing this? Like, what did you have your narrator, what was he feeling, as he was talking about this ghost? Because Carla Gugina's character, right, as it's revealed, like, she's telling the ghost story that ultimately took the love of her life, right?
Ugh. Don't remind me, Steph, but it was so sad and so good. Oh.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So I guess, like, how do you do that, right? Because you're capturing, like, you saw something you liked in, like, I mean, it's a whole show, but, like, her performance is really only in, like, maybe 2 or 3 episodes, right? Mm-hmm. So how'd you take maybe 20 minutes of something and, like, I'm going to give this more of a, your own spin, but more of a life to it?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because I kind of think that the narrator in this, as opposed to like Bly Manor, is more detached from the story. Like, you don't really get a sense of how the narrator relates to this man. But I guess the same could be said with Bly Manor up until the end. Like, you didn't know that Carla Gugino was like connected to the story until the very end. So you thought that she was just telling a random story. So I think the narrator here is kind of detached, but there are like little details that I think show that the narrator has some, like, if not affection, like some interest in this old man. Like, in the fact, like the little fun things about him. I guess I would call them fun. That he can laugh at himself, that he goes down to the pond and he feeds birds. Like, those little details aren't really needed for the story, but I feel like they probably help the reader like the character a little more. Like, oh, he's a cute old man who feeds birds and goes down to the lake and sometimes doesn't put his pants on. You know what I mean? Like, like, I think it was necessary to like soften the blow of the story, because it is kind of a dark story, and I meant it to be sort of dark. Someone who's sort of continually haunted by himself, or haunted by fear, or haunted by an idea of dementia. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know if that really answers your question, but about the narrator, I feel like they're a little detached, but I tried to make it so that they actually might care a little more than a detached narrator.
That definitely answers my question, man. I agree with you, right? These little breadcrumbs of like, you're like, how, if you don't really care about this guy, how do you know all this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, how do you know he plays cards with his homies? How do you know he has good and bad days? How do you know that he took his pants off? Right? Like, how do you know all these things, right? So you clearly have some interest, like you said. And then the other thing I was curious about, right? So the idea of looking at something from various perspectives, right? So you're looking at this old fella, right? When he does have good days, when he does have bad days, right? So he's not like a one-dimensional character. How do you look at something from various perspectives? I guess not just in this story, but as a writer, right? Because it's essentially the same. It's the same character, right? But how do you? Maybe I'm overthinking it, but the question: how do you look at him in various like things and still be honest, right? Like you're not biased to good, you're not biased to bad. You're just how do you tell both sides with a equal fairness and emotion?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that I don't know if I have an answer to. Especially since this character is sort of vague, right? Like we don't even have a name for this man, you know, and a lot of the details are left to the reader's imagination. I mean, you get that he has silver eyes and he's old, you know what I mean? So how do I'm just trying to like repeat the question so I can maybe answer it accurately.
So how did you, this man, how did you fairly write about like, you know, good and bad, right? You mentioned good days and bad days. So how did you fairly write about that emotionally, right? Not giving too much sway to one side or the other.
That's a really it's a really good question. I don't know if I have a good answer. I really don't. And you talked about honesty too. Like, how do you try to like keep it honest? And you know, because I feel like in writing, I tend to do this sometimes, where I like try to pin them down as a good person or a bad person, and I feel like anytime that I do that, it just like makes my character stuck a little more. You know, this character, I don't know if I could even like put him into either camp, which possibly a good thing, or maybe it's just because he's so vague, you know, or so up to interpretation. Because I feel like there's when writing this, I tried to like, you know, I tried to get to like the root of his problem. You know, his problem is that he's afraid and he keeps running away, right? And unfortunately, that is a cycle that he keeps on repeating for himself instead of like confronting this ghost. Like he always runs away, right? So, I guess I wasn't like trying to put like a moral judgment on the fact that he runs away every time. I just think it's like a sort of a sad reality of this character, you know. I don't know. It's freaking sad.
It's very sad, but I think that answers it, right? Like, so you're not putting a moral judgment on it, and like that's a hard thing to do. So I'm admiring that, right? Like you're talking about something honestly without, you know, having like without passing judgment on it, right? Whatever he's going through, you're not judging him as the author, like what he's doing. You're just like, this is the experience, but you say it, like you said, very honestly, and you know, it makes it emotional as a reader.
Yeah, but I would reckon that, you know, so this is one difference between you and I as writers, I've noticed, Stefan, is that you like to have characters that have a lot of detail to them, like you even down to like their name, either it's you pick it because it sounds cool or because like you do some research, like in our last video, you do some research, you're like, oh, that's Dutch, sounds cool, I think it fits this character. You know, I feel like you probably know a lot more about your characters than I do. Like in this story, the fact that he is so up for interpretation makes it easier for me to like not judge. So you know what I mean? Like those vampires that you wrote about in the last episode, you knew like, you know, you knew a little bit about them, you know, and you knew about their backstory, and you know, not that you judged them at all, but you knew like they were going to be the bad guys in the story. You know what I mean? Like it's just the role they had to play, you know, and yeah, I just think that's sort of like. And again, it's not like good or bad. I just think it's an interesting difference between you and I as writers, is that I usually keep it vague and I need to throw in detail, and you have like a ton of detail off the bat. You know what I mean? And you do a lot of planning out of your detail. So yeah, just think that's interesting.
It is an interesting compare, but I like how you know, and not to keep I'm not trying to overly compliment, but I mean, obviously you're very talented and you deserve it wholeheartedly. But like I feel like the vagueness that you roll with, right? That you say that you have, you've noticed that that's how you're writing. I think that also opens not just for you, but again for the reader to kind of slip in their own thoughts and judgment versus being told, hey, these are good, these are bad. Right, it kind of alleviates that choice. Right, you don't have to choose. You don't have to think about it in some aspects. So it's definitely interesting, making you think like, what is this man's past? What is he running from? What's he so scared of? Right, what is he about? Why won't he face it? Right, there are all these things that people can come up with for themselves.
Yeah. But some people would like that in a story. You know what I mean? Like. I'm thinking back to like in my master's program when I had sort of like a creative writing workshop, and I produced, a story similar to this, where it was, this is sort of emblematic of my style. I think it's sort of like pretty vague characters that don't have names, very little description. And I know people who are like, I want to know what they're wearing. Are they wearing a top hat? Like, does he have a mustache? You know what I mean? Like, so, it's up for, to people's taste, I guess, as readers.
Well, I think it's dope. And then I guess my other question for you, man, is what made you pick it as a ghost story? Right? Like, yeah, why a ghost story?
I don't know, man. I'm just really into ghost stories lately. Past year, I've been reading a lot of short fiction ghost stories, and yeah, that kind of carried me throughout the pandemic. So I've been very inspired by what I've read, and that is why. Simply because I'm trying to like either copy the things I like, or throw a little bit of pastiche in there. I don't know. Just I like a good ghost story.
Well, you did it very well, man. You did it very well, and yeah, I loved it. I loved it a lot. It made me think about a lot of things. Ghosts have a way of following you, right, one way or another. So I guess my other question is, do you believe in ghosts? Since not like Ghostbusters, but like some sort of figure along those lines.
I don't know. I don't know, Stefan. I feel like this is a constant pull for me. On one hand, I was the kid who watched Ghost Hunters every Wednesday night, in middle school, being like, wow, this is so exciting. And I'm also the same person that's like, that's full of shit. You know what I mean? Whenever I hear a story, I can only... I've heard stories from people I trust, where they believe in stuff like that. I've never had an encounter, so I can't say definitively or not whether they exist. I will just keep it that vague. I'm going to keep it as vague as my story. I have no clue, but I am happy to entertain the thought.
Might be better. Fair enough, my friend.
I don't want to spread fake news, but I do. I don't know. It's a good question. How about you, Stefan? Do you believe in ghosts?
I think I keep reading some literature like you just said. I'm going to start believing in ghosts, but definitely I think there's I don't know, man. Yeah, I think there's something to spirit, like stuff that follows people, be it a ghost or whatever other term you want to say.
Well, this isn't really like literature or anything, but I know like my sister has had like some, I wouldn't say crazy encounters with ghosts, but like she went to Colonial Williamsburg in 8th grade on a ghost tour, and she took a picture of a house and like we have the photo. Like it's fucking creepy. Like, excuse my French. You know, like it looks like there's somebody like sitting on a porch. You know what I mean? And like she's like, that was a man. You know what I mean? So I'm like, ooh, that's a little creepy. And it looks like there's like things in there. I'm like, that's creepy. That's something I can't explain. And then she took a picture of our second cousin when he was a small child. And when the photo got adapted, it looked like there was like an invisible hand over him, you know, while he was crying, which is like, I know that there's a lot of different things that can happen, you know, in adapting photos, you know, but that was just super creepy. And it's creepy that the kid was crying the entire time, like while the picture was taken, and nobody could figure out why. So it's things like that that make me go, maybe there's something here. But then I hear some BS creepypasta from the internet, and I'm like, this is the worst. So yeah. I hope I haven't rambled too much, Stefan, but thank you.
No, man, you have not. And that photo sounds terrifying, and I kind of want to see it, but I also don't. I kind of like the idea of ghosts how you wrote them, not the maybe harsh reality that they could be. But I guess, Dan the Man, in our, do you have a little teaser you could drop about what we could be hearing from you possibly in the next episodes to come?
The first spear is just two sticks.
I can't make any commitment.
You heard it here first, gang. You gotta wait till next time.
Next time.
To see what's going down. But I hope you like what you saw and like what you heard. I know I did. Dan the Man, a pleasure hearing any tale from you. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Steph. And thank you to anybody who listens. I hope I didn't bore you too much, but thank you.
You've just inspired the next generation. Don't even play.
No.
You're too humble.
Well, thank you, Steph, and thank you everyone who listens. I'll leave it at that.
Too humble. That's not bad. That's good. But yeah, you're a very humble man. You're great. You're just great.
Thank you.
Just got pitch slapped.
Yes, just got pitch slapped.
I
feel like you just scared yourself for that too. Like you slapped your hands and you didn't know what you were going to say with it. So you just started laughing.
Yeah, that seems like a good way to hide it. But we will see you next time.
Yeah. Have a good one.